كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. I hope everyone's doing well. So welcome to lesson 5, in which now we're actually going to move on to delve a bit into the Maliki madhab. So what we're going to be looking at is a brief overview of the life of Imam Malik, in terms of his teachers, in terms of his students, and then we'll also be looking at what the ulama has said about Imam Malik, and then we'll also look at some of the stages of the Maliki madhab. And again, as I mentioned before, this is just a brief intro into the madhahib. So of course everything we'll try to relate back to the Hanafi madhab wherever there is an overlap, and then we'll try to make like a comparison so we can kind of understand how other madhabs operate in terms of similar to the Hanafi madhab and where they differ. Once we kind of finish off with these introductory remarks, we're going to move on discussing books of Dalailul Madhab in the Dalailul Madhab for the Hanafi Madhab. So basically books written to defend the Hanafi Madhab, and we'll kind of look at some parts of some popular books, so therefore we can actually know where to refer back to if we are looking for a defense of the madhab. But anyway, so today's session we'll be looking at the Maliki madhab, which is of course the second earliest after Imam Abu Hanifa. So Imam Malik comes slightly after, or is a contemporary of Imam Abu Hanifa. And although it's not discussed, as I mentioned, we're going to use this book as a base, but I'm going to be also highlighting other points of interest away from the book as well, inshallah. So it's not just a reading, it's a we can learn some additional points alongside what the book is saying. Now, out of the four imams, Imam Abu Hanifa was a contemporary of Imam Malik, or rather the contrary, because Imam Abu Hanifa was older. Imam Malik was a contemporary Imam Abu Hanifa, and there are narrations of the two meeting, and there's also a few narrations suggesting that the both of them narrated from each other a hadith. This is something which is disputed, and I don't think is established. The narrations of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik have been highly disputed as being not authentic. Ibn Hajar actually quite explicitly mentions this in his Nukat ala Kitab al-Salah. And as for Imam Malik narrating from Imam Abu Hanifa, it is something mentioned within the Manaqib literature of Imam Abu Hanifa, but the authenticity of which is still open. Allah knows best. I do have my reservations about that. But anyway, let's move on. Right, so the life of Imam Malik, or a brief intro into him. هو الإمام أبو عبد الله مالك بن أنس بن مالك بن أبي عامر بن عمرو بن حارث بن غيمان بن خثيل بن عمرو بن حارث وذو أصبح بن عوف بن مالك, and the full name is mentioned. الحميري الأصبحي المدني حليف بني تيم بن قريش, وهم حلفاء عثمان أخي طلحة بن عبيد الله 11, وأمه هي عالية بنت شريك الأزدية. So his mother name, they were Halif's clients from the of the Quraysh, and his mother's name was Aliyah bint Sharik al-Azdiya. He was born in the year 93 Hijri. He was born in the year 93 Hijri. If you recall, Imam Abu Hanifa was born in the year 80 Hijri. So this would make Imam Malik 13 years younger than Imam Abu Hanifa, right? There has been, I believe I did mention this briefly, but there has been some debate regarding the birth date of Imam Abu Hanifa, with some suggesting an earlier date, some saying 70, some suggesting 64, around 66, 67 potentially as well, which would make Imam Abu Hanifa relatively older than Imam Malik to around 20-25 years. But the most correct and the most authentic, which has been mentioned by numerous sources, is that the birthday of Imam Abu Hanifa is 80, so therefore he would make him approximately 13 years older than Imam Malik. فرأى في هذه المدة من عمره آثار الصحابة تتلمذ على يد تلاميذ الصحابة. So in this era, so 93 Hijri, There is no evidence that he had met any Sahaba, but he had become students at the hand of the students of the Sahaba. So, for example, one of the teachers of, or the two popular, famous teachers of Imam Malik, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri was a famous tabi'i, and you also have him directly narrating from Nafi', who is the Mawla of Ibn Umar. Right? Nafi', the Mawla Ibn Umar, Imam Malik heard from him directly. Imam Malik rahimahullah he said كانت أمي تعممني وتقول لي اذهب إلى ربيعة فتعلم من أدبه قبل علمه. That Imam Malik said himself that my mother placed an imama around my head, and this was a sign of a person acquiring knowledge in that era, was that they were the students of knowledge, they will place an imama, and that will show that you're a student of knowledge. So she wrapped an imam around me and she said, go to Rabi'a, this is Rabi'a to Ra'i, and learn from him etiquette before knowledge. Right? So at a young age he was sent by his mother to learn, which is quite different to Imam Abu Hanifa, which seems like he was much more of it. He was a bit older when he started to go for his journey of knowledge, and it seems like it's much more of his own accord rather than being sent by his parents. Ibn Qasim says أفضى بمالك طلب العلم إلى أن نقض سقف بيته فباع خشبه ثم مالت عليه الدنيا بعد. وقال إمام مالك كان لي أخ في سن بن شهاب فألقى أبي يوما علينا مسألة فأصاب أخي وأخطأت فقال لي أبي ألهتك الحمام عن طلب العلم فغضبت وانقطعت إلى ابن هرمز 7 سنين وفي رواية 8 سنين لم أخلطه بغيره. So he mentioned a scenario of that his older brother, right, or his brother who's older than him, was asked a question by the father, and he responded, I responded, I got it wrong. And so he said that you have been occupied by birds, right, the pigeons, you occupied by them. So but rather than seeking knowledge, you've been basically playing games. And so that angered me. So then I went to Ibn Hurmuz for 7 years, right, and acquired knowledge. Imam Dhahabi says طلب مالك علم وهو ابن 11 سنة. Imam Malik sought knowledge while he was about 12, 13 plus, right. وتأهل الفتية وجلس إفادة وله 21 سنة. At the age of 21, he had gained competency to give fatwa, and he sat to benefit others at the age of 21. وحدث عنه جماعة وهو حي شاب طري. And a group of people narrated from him while he was still very young and fresh, basically very young. وقصده طلبة العلم الآفاق في آخر دولة أبي الجعفر منصور وما بعدها وازدحموا عليه في خلافة الرشيد وإلى أن مات. So as he was getting older in age, the crowds of people that come to Malik was much more larger. So Malik started his teaching at the age of 21, which is relatively early for teaching. There's different manhaj, if you like, or different perspectives that ulama have in terms of how long should a person wait until they teach. So usually the greats like Imam Malik, because they are greats, they justify to teach much more earlier, whereas a student to sit down and give fatwa like that on like this kind of public level or becoming a public scholar, the age of 21 is usually considered, as in our day and age, should be considered too early. A person should delay it more, but of course there are always special people for that. And Malik said himself, and this is narrated by Ibn Dhahabi in Siyar A'lam Nubala, he says, ما تعلمت العلم إلا لنفسي وما تعلمت ليحتاج الناس إلي. He goes, I did not seek knowledge except for myself. I did not seek knowledge so that people require me. Right? It was a personal endeavor. It was basically, there wasn't a goal of trying to become famous and popular. ولما قصد وجه الله تعالى وفقه وفتح عليه باب العلم فتحا عظيما حتى كان شيوخ يرجعون إليه. That because of the sincerity, Sheikh Saif al-Asri now is commenting, he says that Allah opened the door for him, the door of knowledge for him so greatly, such that his own teachers would come back to him, referring to him for questions. Ibn Wahab Ibn Qasim say ما أحد ممن نقلت عنه علم إلا اضطر إلي حتى سألني عن دينه. كان مالك يجلس على ضجاع ونمارق مطروحة في منزله يمنة ويسرة لمن يأتي من قريش والأنصار والناس، وكان مجلسه مجلس وقار وعلم، وكان رجلا مهيبا نبيلا ليس في مجلس شيء من المراء واللغط ولا رفع الصوت. إذا سئل عن شيء فأجاب سائله لم يقل له من أين رأيت هذا. And this is actually very important, in the fact that, if you do recall in the earlier sessions, we were discussing about the manhaj of Imam Abu Hanifa when it came to teaching. And the manhaj of Imam Abu Hanifa differed quite radically from the manhaj of Imam Malik in terms of the educational process. Is that he got, as mentioned here, quote from Tartib al-Madarik, that Imam Malik's majlis was a majlis where he says waqar ilm, meaning that when you went to that majlis, it was a serious majlis, in the sense that there was not excessive questioning, excessive talking. It was, you're here to learn from Malik and then understand that. And at the end of this, he says, whenever someone asked Malik a question, they said, what's the hukm of such and such? And he gave an answer. No one would say to Malik, Min ayna ra'ayta hadha? Where did you get this from? In the majlis of Imam Malik, this was seen as khilaful adab, to ask Malik where he got the knowledge from. And if you recall, this is very, very different from the majlis of Imam Abu Hanifa, where there was raf'u sawt. People would say, would speak out. They'll give their opinion, they'll refute, they'll debate, all in the presence of Imam Abu Hanifa. And then there was adab as well, but the adab was that when it was time for Imam Abu Hanifa to give his conclusion, then people went silent. But there was never any objection to objecting to Imam Abu Hanifa. That was never a thing within the Hanafi circles. Now, a person looks back at this and says, what's the right method? Well, both are Imams. Right? Both are Imams, and people have different mizaj, have different perspectives. Some teachers do not want to engage in unnecessary back and forth with the students. They are saying to the students that, I've spent so much time learning, I'm going to give you my knowledge, you take what you can take and go with it. I'm not here to debate you. And then other teachers that think, no, my job as a teacher is to engage with the students, is to debate the students. And that is completely fine. Both methods are perfectly fine. And you'll find that those of you who have had numerous teachers, you realize these qualities in certain teachers, where you go to a certain teacher's class, the way you sit, the way you talk, the way you ask questions, the way you read, everything you do is done very particularly. And then you have other teachers that are not so particular. They're more about discourse, challenging, etc., back and forth. And there'll be other teachers that are much more about tarbiyah maybe. Everyone has their own perspectives. There's nothing wrong in that, as long as, of course, nothing haram is taking place, which will not be the case. So therefore, these are all different types of learning. Imam Abu Hanifa, what's interesting is that, but when we talk about education today, the type of education that's usually supported as being more effective for critical thinking is actually the manhaj of Imam Abu Hanifa, which is much more conducive to such, which is just an interesting fact. I would want to just to highlight, and it's important because this is a key difference between the mizaj. Understand this, between the mizaj of Imam Malik and the mizaj of Imam Abu Hanifa. And there are other reports to this effect. This is not one off, by the way, right? There's other reports that also emphasize this perspective of Imam Malik when it came to teaching. Right, so now moving on to the teachers of Imam Malik. I'm just going to note the teachers that are that Imam Malik narrated from Sahaba. Right, so there's a number of teachers, but there are those who narrate from Sahaba. So these are the senior teachers of Imam Malik. They are as follows. You have Abu Abdullah Nafi' al-Qurashi ثم العدوي الإمام مفتي ثبت عالم المدينة مولى بن عمر وراويه. You got Abu Abdullah, this is Nafi', the Mawla ibn Umar. Of course, he was the Mawla ibn Umar, one of the most extensive narrators from Abdullah ibn Umar. Sa'id ibn Kaysan, who's also known by Sa'id ibn Abi Sa'id al-Maqburi al-Laythi al-Tabi' al-Jalil. Al-Maqburi, right, he can be read with Maqbari or Maqburi, saying with Dhamm al-Ya wa Fathiha. And so he used to attribute to him Maqabir, which is graves. So that means he used to live, he used to live near a graveside, so he became the name Maqburi. And it is said, لأن عمر الخطاب جعله على حفر قبول مدينة. And he's also said that Sa'id ibn Kaysan, because he was considered he was a grave digger, right? This is why he was given that name. Other people: Abu Haris, Amr ibn Abdullah ibn Zubayr ibn Awam al-Asadi al-Imam al-Rabbani, Ahd al-Ubbad. Abu Abdullah Muhammad al-Munkadir ibn Abdullah al-Qurashi al-Taymi. Abu Abdullah صفوان بن سليم القرشي الزهري المدني إمام ثقة الحافظ فقيه مولى حميد بن عبد الرحمن بن عوف and Abu Abdurrahman Abdullah bin Dinar and Adaw al-Umari Mawla Imam Muhaddith Hujjah, because these are those that he narrated from, who narrated from Sahaba. Books to refer to, he says that there's a separate book written by Sheikh al-Faqih Abu Abdullah Muhammad Ismail ibn Khalafoun al-Azdi al-Andalusi, who died in 636, which is named Asma'u Shuyukh Malik ibn Anas, in which the teachers of Imam Malik are documented. As for the students of Imam Malik, then again there's a whole number of students, just those who, for example, had transmitted the Muwatta, the likes of Yahya bin Yahya al-Laythi, Ibn Wahab, Ibn al-Qasim, and even Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, which is very important for our purpose, because Imam Muhammad Hassan al-Shaybani, when he came to the Muwatta Imam Malik, what he does, and this shows a close connection between the Hanafi and the Maliki madhab, is that Imam Muhammad, being a student of Imam Abu Hanifa, not just any old student, one of the closest students and most and single-handedly the most influential and important Hanafi figure, the fact that he went and he studied with Imam Malik, and not only studied with Imam Malik, he transmits his Muwatta, and not only to transmit his Muwatta, he changes the order of the Muwatta, adds in the position of Imam Abu Hanifa, and adds in additional narrations of that support the Kufan school, even the narration of Imam Abu Hanifa in some places as well. And so there you have a important overlap from the students of Imam Malik. What do the ulama say about Imam Malik? There are some scholars who have said that this is the likes of Sufyan bin Uyayna, etc., that the hadith which comes in Muslim Ahmad and Tirmidhi, which says يوشك أن يضرب الناس أكباد إبل يطلبون علم فلا يجدون أحدا أعلى من عالم المدينة, that people are going to be seeking knowledge, right, from afar, and they will not find anyone more knowledgeable than the alim of Medina. Who is this alim of Medina? And again, as I mentioned, I've mentioned this before, scholars have differed, but what is popularly said from the manaqib of Imam Malik, as noted here by Sufyan bin Uyayna, is that alim of Medina is in reference to Imam Malik, such that Imam Tirmidhi, after citing this hadith, says وَقَدْ رُوِيَ عن ابن عيينة أنه قال في هذا سئل من عالم مدينة فقال إنه مالك بن أنس. So in Jami' Tirmidhi, Imam Tirmidhi says quite explicitly from Ibn Uyayna that he was asked, who is the alim of Medina? And Imam Sufyan bin Uyayna said that it is Imam Malik ibn Anas. If that is correct, then that is of course one of the greatest manqaba that you can have, which is being prophesied by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But again, that's something which there is alternative explanations for that narration as well. Imam Shafi'i says either, of course, Imam Shafi'i being from the students of Imam Malik as well, but a younger student. Right, a younger student. Imam Shafi'i was born in 150 Hijri, and that would have mean that Imam Malik would have been in his late 50s when Imam Shafi'i was born. And so, of course, when Imam Shafi'i would have come to seek knowledge from him, he would have been in his latter part of his life. Books to refer to, if you want to look at the life of Imam Malik, he mentions the following books. He says, you have Manaqib Imam Malik radiyallahu anhu Abi Bakr Ahmad ibn Marwan ad-Dinuri al-Misri, who dies in 310. You have Al-Intiqa fi Tarajim al-Thalathat al-Fuqaha lil-Imam Ibn Abdul Barr al-Maliki. So Ibn Abdul Barr al-Maliki has a book on the three fuqaha, the three fuqaha being Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, and Imam Shafi'i. Right, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, and Imam Shafi'i. So he has a book on the three Imams. This is by Ibn Abdul Barr. Other books such as Tazyeen al-Ara'ik bi Manaqib al-Imam Malik Imam Jalaluddin al-Suyuti. So of course Imam Suyuti, mentioned before, had a book on the Manaqib of Imam Abu Hanifa, which is called Tabyeed al-Sahifa. And he's also got a biography or Manaqib work on the life of Imam Malik. And then you have the famous Tartib al-Madarik by Qadi Iyad, Ad-Dibaj al-Madhab li Ibn Farahun, and Imam Malik al-Allama Abu Zahra. Allama Abu Zahra is a contemporary scholar, Azhari I believe, and he was someone who had written very useful and very effective and very influential biographies of the four Imams, and not just the four Imams, other figures as well. So he's got a separate, and these are quite large works. on Imam Abu Hanifa. He's got one Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmed. He's also got a separate biographies on Imam Zayd ibn Ali. He's also got one on Ibn Taymiyyah. Then he's got a general book on the four madhahib as well, which has been translated at least partially, if not the whole thing, into English. And it's a very popular work by Sheikh Abu Zahra. So this is from the contemporary works written on the lives of the Imams. No doubt Sheikh Abu Zahra has made a lasting and influential impact. Now, the stages which the madhab goes through. Right, the stages which the madhab goes through. So quickly, if you just remember, just to remind ourselves, we don't want to forget this, that in the Hanafi madhab, we have the Tabaqat al-Masail. So we have like Zahir Riwaya, Nawadir, Fatawa Mashayikh, or Nawazil. And then we also have, we spoke about the period, so it's Abu Hanifa and his students. And then you have the period after that, where you have the students of Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf. And then you get to the Mukhtasar genre, such as the books like the Mukhtasar Qarhi, the Mukhtasar Tahawi, eventually Mukhtasar Quduri, and then you get the commentaries on these works, the larger works, the Sarakhsis, etc., and so on and so forth. So we spoke about some of the stages which the Hanafi madhab goes through. What were the stage that the Maliki madhab goes through? So Sheikh Saif al-Asri starts, he says, مر المذهب المالكي كغيره من المذاهب بمراحل. That the Maliki madhab, just like any other madhab, went through stages. And you can briefly say that it went through the following stages. So of course, any a detailed study of the Maliki madhab will require someone who's far more competent in the madhab, and he can go into multiple sessions. But for our purposes, what are the major stages? So he goes, the first stage is مرحلة النشأة, which is the origin phase. وهي المرحلة التي وضع فيها الإمام مالك أصوله في الاستنباط واستخرج الفروع إلا أن هذه الأصول لم يسطرها الإمام مالك في كتاب خاص ولم ينص عليها جميعا بلفظ واضح. And this is a similar issue with Imam Hanifa, with the Hanafi madhab as well, is that the first stage is the life of Imam Malik, where Imam Malik is kind of formulating his fiqh by setting out his usul, how he derives things from the Quran and Sunnah. But similar with Imam Hanifa as well, is that there is no book of usul by Malik. Right? There is no book of usul by Malik. We do see multiple instances in, for example, the Muwatta, where Imam Malik would mention the usul that he's using. Right? He'll mention the usul that he's using. He goes, on this, alayhi aml ahli Medina. Right? Or هذا حديث صحيح, or he might say some sort of phrase like that, which shows that this is authentic in contrast to something else. We do find that. But in terms of a dedicated book of usul from Imam Malik, just like Imam Abu Hanifa, there is no dedicated book of usul by Imam Malik. And so therefore the job is, again, similar to the Hanafi madhab, the job is to derive. So he goes, وَقَدْ قَامَتْ تَلَامِيذُهُ مِنْ أَئِمَّةِ بِاسْتِخْرَاجِ هَذِهِ الْأُصُولِ بِاسْتِقْرَاءِ أَقْوَالِ إِمَامِ مَالِكِ وَفَتَاوِيهِ. That his students had to derive, the Imams from them, derive these usul by doing a comprehensive reading of the position and the legal verdicts of Imam Malik. فَاسْتَخْلَصُوا مِنْ كُلِّ ذَلِكَ قَوَاعِدِ الْمَذْهَبِ وَأُصُولَهُ الَّتِي يُبْنَى الْمَذْهَبَ عَلَيْهَا. And so that's where we start to get the usul of the madhab. And he says, وَتَنْتَهِي هذه المرحلة بنهاية القرن الثالث الذي توجت بنبوغ عالم العراق القاضي إسماعيل بن إسحاق المتوفى سنة 82 و200 مؤلف المبسوط. And he goes, how long does this process go for when they're trying to codify the usul Imam Malik? He goes, this goes to the end of the 3rd century, so the 200s. Until you get to the Imam of Iraq, Qadi Ismail ibn Ishaq, who died in the year 282, the author of Mabsut. آخر دواوين ظهورا وهي مرحلة تميزت بوضع أسس المذهب وجمع سماعات الإمام وروايات عنه وتدوينها وتنظيمها في مؤلفات معتمدة. So that's how they it kind of gets codified in the works of Qadi Ismail, who dies in the year 282. He actually cites it from Istilah Madhab in the Malikiyya by Muhammad Ibrahim Ali. Right, that's where he gets this first stage of the Maliki madhab from. Right, so that's the first stage, Marad al-Nash'a. Right, as we mentioned, that he says he ends with the scholar of Iraq, Qadi Ismail ibn Ishaq, who dies in the year 282. The second, so that's what he's trying to say, is a codification of the Masail and the Usul. right? Codification of the Masail and Usul. And then you have Marhad al-Tafri' wa Tatbiq. And again, this follows a similar trajectory, of course, with different figures, but the general trajectory is very similar to, as we mentioned, the Hanafi madhab as well. So he goes, وَهَذِهِ الْمَرْحَلَةِ, and again, he's quoting from the book Istilah Madhab in al-Malikiyya by Muhammad Ibrahim Ali. He says, هذه المرحلة التي تم فيها التفريع والتطبيق والترجيح. You have three things to do in this stage. Number one is to branch out. Number two is to apply. And number three is tarjih, to give preference. Because as we have with other madhahib as well, is that the positions of Imam Malik, because he lived a long life, and within that life there will sometimes be varying positions, and sometimes when people are transmitting the position of Imam Malik, there could be sometimes error in transmission, or usually it could just be a shift in position of Imam Malik. So we have to try to work out what to do. ترجيحه. وتبدأ هذه المرحلة تقريبا ببداية القرن الرابع الهجري. So this began at the beginning of the 4th century. At the beginning of the 4th century, so we're saying about the year just the beginning of the 300s. وتتسم بظهور نوابغ المالكية الذين فرعوا وطبقوا ومن ثم رجحوا وشهروا، وتنتهي هذه المرحلة بنهاية القرن السادس الهجري وبداية القرن السابع، أو بوفاة ابن شاش رابع أربعة اعتمدهم خليل بن إسحاق مؤلف أشهر مختصر في فقه المالكي. So because this stage of tafri', which is now it's the job of trying to branch out, apply and give preference. So you're basically, it's a time of exploration of the madhab. If you want to use a different word, right? It's a time of exploration to see how does the madhab, what are the implications of the masail of Imam Malik, how can we apply them, and what's the and try to capture that tafri'. And he goes, this kind of continues. He goes, and this kind of stage ends by the end of the 6th century. So according to this, there will be around about 300-year period where this is happening, and the beginning of the 7th century, or in other words, by the death of Ibn Shash. And Ibn Shash, who is the last of the 4 figures that was relied upon by Khalil, which is obviously the author of the famous Mukhtasar Khalil ibn Ishaq, and so he's one of the 4 that was relied upon. So the last of the 4 that Khalil relies upon for his famous Mukhtasar was dies in 616. So it goes with 616. You can highlight, say that's the end of this phase. Of course, I'm pretty sure there's much more nuance and detail to this. Just a very brief overview to get an idea. And then the 3rd stage, which he kind of concludes on, he calls it Marhat Istiqrar. Is the period of where the madhab establishes. وهذه المرحلة, this stage begins with the بداية القرن السابع الهجري تقريبا, around the end of the 7th century, approximately. Or in other words, you can say by the beginning, or when the book Mukhtasar ibn Hajib, also known as Jami' al-Ummahat, was that came into or basically was written. ويستمر إلى عصر الحاضر, and so from that era to our time, this era continues. هذه المرحلة عرفت شروح والاختصارات والحواشي والتعليلات، وهي سمة تظهر غالبا بوضوح حين يصل علماء المذهب إلى قناعة فكرية بأن اجتهادات علماء المذهب السابقين لم تترك مجال لمزيد من الاجتهاد إلا يكون اختيار اختصار أو شرحا. And so basically the idea is just like we have in the notion in other notion of the madhub, which is that by the end of the 6th and 7th century, what needs to be said about Imam Malik's view, right, has been said. Now it's the job of the Mukhtasar, and then writing Hawashi, detailing the rationale, commentaries. That kind of continues then up to our time. But in essence, the real activity of the madhab, which is being referenced from Dr. Muhammad Ibrahim Ali from the book Istilah Madhab al-Malikiyya, this is from there, is that the main activity of the madhab finishes at the end of the 7th century, and thereafter you have that period which is of istiqrar. Now it's just establishing itself. So you have the activity now, preferences given, different opinion. Now it's about trying to establish itself, saying we have now concluded on X, Y, and Z, and detailing that. وذهب بعضهم إلى تقسيم مراحل المذهب المالكي إلى 5 مراحل. Some have chosen to divide it into 5 stages. The first stage, مرحلة التأسيس, ثم مرحلة التفريع وسبق ذكرهما. So they start with the same 2, origin and then tafri', expanding. Then they say ثم مرحلة التطبيق التي برز فيها كتب التهذيب والمختصرات ودراسة المسائل الخلافية. And they say application تطبيق is a separate stage to تفريع. Then you got ثم مرحلة التنقيح والذي برزت فيها الحركات النقدية لأقوال المتقدمة أتباع المذهب. So then you have the stage of critical analysis, which is where the earlier positions of the earlier positions that have been highlighted are critically assessed. والكثير من مسائل التصحيح وتضعيفها. And then finally, after that's the activity process, and then you have the final stage of جمع الاختصار, which is try to gather all the information and then to provide a mukhtasar, these kind of abridgments to it. Which would, if you're to take this as on face value, and as I mentioned, the details of such would be best to go and refer to a Maliki scholar for, or a historian of the Maliki madhab. But for our purposes, just to make a general comparison, the Hanafi madhab of ikhtisar starts much more earlier. So therefore the qarar, if you like, the establishment of the usul of the madhab is far more manifest on an earlier period. Earlier period. It's an interesting note how much of an impact that has, that delay in these mukhtasar. That's something for someone within the Maliki madhab to assess. Now, within the Hanafi madhab, which we'll look at later, inshallah, potentially in this semester, if we have a following semester, which is the madaris within the Hanafi madhab. And what they mean by madaris is that you have the school of thought, and then within the school of thought, you usually have smaller schools of thought. And these are madaris that they refer to. Right? These are madaris. You can say, we say like an institution, but a school of thought basically. And so the madaris of the Maliki madhab, he's highlighted into the following madrasas. He's mentioned here 5 madrasas for the Maliki madhab. The first madrasa he mentions is Madrasatul Madina, right? And of course you'd expect it to be madrasa there because that's where Imam Malik was stationed. So كانت المدينة المنورة منطلق المذهب ومنها انتشر إلى غيرها. وإذا ورد ذكر المدنيين فالمراد بهم ابن كنانة وابن الماجشون ومطرف وابن نافع وابن مسلمة ونظراؤهم. So when the Madrasa Medina is referred to, these are the scholars that it is being mentioned. Then you have Madrasa Misriya, the Egyptian Madrasa. ظهر المذهب المالكي في مصر في حياة إمام مالك رحمه الله. So in the lifetime of Malik, you have students of him that had gone to Egypt. وكان أول من أدخله مصر عثمان بن حكم وعبد الرحيم ابن خالد بن يزيد وعبد الرحمن بن قاسم. وكان سماعات ابن قاسم وما نقل من آراء مالك في المدينة في المدونة عمدة المذهب وسبب انتشاره في مصر وإفريقيا وأندلس. Look at his point. So he goes, the Maliki madhab became apparent in Egypt during his lifetime. The first people to enter Egypt was Uthman ibn Hakam, Abdul Rahim ibn Khalid ibn Yazid, Abdul Rahim ibn Qasim. And they had heard from Ibn Qasim. كان سماعات ابن قاسم وما نقل من آراء مالك في المدونة عمدة المذهب. And Ibn Qasim is one of those who had was a key figure within the Mudawwana, which we'll come to later inshallah. And so that becomes a key reason why the positions of the Maliki method spread within Egypt, Africa and Andalus. Al-Misriyun, this is Allama Khirashi mentioned in his Sharh Mukhtasar Khalil. Al-Misriyun yusharu bihim ila Ibn Qasim wa Ashhab wa Ibn Wahab wa Asbagh ibn Farj wa Ibn Abdul Hakam wa Nudhara'ihim. That's what is referred to by the Egyptians. Then you have the Madrasa Iraqiyya, the Iraqi school. والعراقيون يشار بهم إلى قاضي إسماعيل وقاضي أبي الحسن وابن القصار وابن الجلاب والقاضي عبد الوهاب والقاضي أبي الفرج والشيخ أبي بكر الأبهري ونظرائهم. That's why it's referred to Madrasa Iraqiyya. قاضي عياض says واستقر ببلاد العراق بالبصرة فغلب عليهم مذهب مالك بابن مهدي والكعنبي وغيرهما ثم باتباع من ابن بن يعقوب بن شيبة آل حماد بن زيد إلى أن أدخل بعد شافعية فتشارك المذهبان جميعا إلى وقتنا هذا. So he goes, in Iraq you had a strong Maliki presence and that was actually dominant until the era of Qadi Iyad. You come into the 6th century that you have the Shafi'is participate. So then therefore you have 2 schools in Iraq, specifically Basra, which become dominant. And then you have Madrasa Maghrabiyya. والمغاربة يشار به إلى الشيخ ابن أبي زيد قيرانوي والقابسي وابن لباد والباجي أبو وليد الباجي واللخمي وابن محرز وابن عبد البر وابن رشد وابن عربي والقاضي سند والمخزومي. These are the Maghribi scholars. Yeah, these are the Maghribi scholars. They are those that had it established themselves in the Maghrib. And the Maghrib, what he doesn't mention here is that there was a strong, an Andalus specifically, he has Andalus separate here, as some had separated it, but although it comes within the Maghrib, that the area had a strong Zahiri presence. So he mentions Ibn Abdul Barr. Ibn Abdul Barr himself was originally a Zahiri, and then he adopted the Maliki madhab. So there is a strong engagement with Dalail. So Abu Walid al-Baji, Ibn Abdul Barr, they're very good at comparative fiqh because they are engaging with the writings of Ibn Hazm and those such figures. So you see a very strong presence of the fiqh al-khilaf that we become so accustomed to. So if I summarize, just kind of carry on a bit for the last few minutes, inshallah, is that Sheikh Saif al-Asri has this, section in here of how to study the Maliki madhab in terms of stages that you're meant to adopt. So starting with the first initial text and you go through it. I don't see the benefit of us having to go through all of that. A person can refer to it, but on page 139, he has a useful section which is just to cite or mention a number of the relied upon books in the Maliki madhab. And so it's good to kind of note these books' names down because of the sheer importance of them. So from the Maliki madhab, the most important text that he starts off with is the Mudawwana of Sahnun. So the Mudawwana Sahnun, who asks questions to the students of Imam Malik. And so this becomes one of the most important sources. The Muwatta itself, because it's not a book of fiqh, it's a book of riwayat, or prophetic narrations and qawl al-sahaba, within which you have fiqh. But usually it's considered that if there is a khilaf between the Mudawwana and the Muwatta, then the Mudawwana is given preference because Mudawwana is situated for the purpose of fiqh and the Muwatta is not. A famous example of this is that in the Muwatta Imam Malik, he cites the hadith of Raf al-Yadayn, but in the Mudawwana, he explicitly says that I do not recognize the Raf al-Yadayn in Salah except for the Takbir al-Ula, in which there is a Raf'un khafif, a light rising. So you do have, so the Muwatta is not actually mentioned here as one of the, not saying it's not mu'tamad, but it's not really a fiqh text in that sense. The second work he mentions here is Sharh Allama Ahmad al-Muhammad al-Qalshani al-Tunisi, who dies in 863 upon the Risala Ibn Abi Zayd, although this is still in manuscript form. The Risala Ibn Abi Zayd is extremely important text. He also mentions here the Tabsirat al-Hukam في أصول الأقضية ومناهج أحكام by Imam Burhanuddin Abu Ishaq Ibrahim ibn Sheikh Abu al-Hasan Ali ibn Farahun al-Madani al-Sheikh al-Imam al-Umda al-Bayan wa Tahsil لما في المستخرج من توجيه وتعليل by al-Imam Qadi Abu al-Walid Muhammad Ahmad ibn Rushd al-Qurtubi, who dies in 520. This is a book that I have utilized in the past for a few reasons. It's a very useful text where a number of the masail which come in the early texts of the madhab are explained. You have Sharh al-Talqeen, والتلقين هو من تأليف الإمام قاضي عبد الوهاب, والشرح هو للإمام أبي عبد الله محمد بن علي بن عمر التميمي المازري. This is still in manuscript form by Imam Maziri, being a leading Maliki scholar. He's got a commentary on the Talqeen of Qadi Abdul Wahhab. The seventh text he mentions is Sharh Bahram ala Mukhtasar Khalil. So Mukhtasar Khalil, we highlighted before briefly, is probably the most famous abridgment in the Maliki text, Maliki madhab, and one of the most important Maliki texts. On it, there are a number of commentaries. So usually if you're trying to find just a mu'tamad in the madhab, the Mukhtasar Khalil will be your first go-to. And now here to mention some of the commentaries of it, you have Taysir al-Malik al-Jalil li Jam'i Shuru' al-Hawashi Khalil by Allama Abi Najah Salim bin Muhammad Izzuddin Sunhuri al-Misri al-Maliki. And he's mentioning works here which are still in manuscript form, right? He goes, "Lam ولا يزال شرحه هذا مخطوطا." This remains to be in manuscript form. But whatever the case, this is a comprehensive or a gathering of all the important commentaries on the Mukhtasar Khalil. And the ninth text he mentions, Sharh Kabir wa Saghir ala Mukhtasar Khalil by Imam Ahmad ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Musa ibn Abdul Haq al-Yazlitani al-Qarawi min ulama al-Qarn al-Tasi'. And the 10th text is Mukhtasar ibn Arafah, which is a very popular text, readily available, by Imam Muhammad ibn Arafah al-Warghami al-Tunisi al-Maliki, dies in 803. ومن أراد المزيد فعليه بكتاب نور البصر شرح خطبة المختصر by علامة أبي العباس سيد أحمد بن عبد العزيز ابن الرشيد الهلالي فقد ذكر فيه الكتب معتمدة. So you guys want to refer to a lengthier list, refer to the book نور البصر شرح خطبة المختصر by أبي العباس سيدي أحمد بن عبد العزيز. في كتب he cites therein the relied upon books وما عليهم من المآخذ and some criticism against them والكتب غير معتمدة in the الانفراد and the books which are not relied upon in isolation they are all clarified within the book نور البصر. You will refer back to that for more detail.